What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the eighth album by Cypress Hill. Basically, this project is called Rise Up, and it came out in the spring of 2010. Now, they took 6 years off between this particular album and Till Death Do Us Part from 2004. And the thing about this particular project is it's kind of a different burst to them, I would have to say. It's got kind of some this project kind of has more rock rap reminiscent of like Rage Against the Machine, and also kind of like some soulful kind of East Coast kind of mixtape type feels like from New York and stuff like that. It's just kind of a different kind of theme. It's kind of like a dual theme as far as this kind of happens. Just a lot more of like a more kind of like activist kind of album, I would have to say, just more in that sense of just kind of being out and about and more bustle. This is not so much just like smoking and like a shack, something like that, kicking back. It's not even really summer bound and stuff like that. I just had to say, I mean, there are some summer boilers on here, but just the concept of this particular album is just the fact that it's just a lot more kind of just more progressive and just kind of more outlining and just kind of more out and about and just in the wind and that type of stuff. I just would have to say it's got a lot more kind of contemporary type feels about it. This album just reminds me of something that Public Enemy or Rage Against the Machine would do if they were more stoners, I would have to say. It's just kind of the concept about it. Just a lot more city bustle as far as it kind of happens. Just a lot of good out and about kind of tunes. Just and not all of this album is really smoke ready. I would have to say there are some smoking tunes on here, but the production is just a lot starker. It's definitely not like Temples of Boom or Cypress Hill 4, and it's not really even like the ghostly kind of feel of Stone Raiders or the rock rap kind of feel of Skull and Bones, I would have to say. It's just kind of different. And I feel like the kind of offhanded, kind of more summer malaise of Till Death Do Us Part is not really on here either. It's just very much like a city-oriented kind of skyscraper. This is very much like a city-oriented kind of skyscraper and kind of head shop like. Just places like that, head shops, hookah bars, and places like that, just in a more kind of cityscaping, kind of more productive, activist kind of sense as far as that kind of happens. It's just interesting, kind of get that. But the singles are just different pitch from normal Cypress Hill. This is kind of like an offhanded kind of album from them, I would have to say. It was just an interesting concept because there is some solid stuff on here. Originally, I was going to think that this might have been one of Cypress Hill's worst, but it's just kind of a different taste. You just have to kind of adjust your radio wavelengths as far as being able to say that this is not, this is just a little bit different fare. They tried some new stuff on this particular album and it just kind of works for what it does. I mean, it's not like if you miss like Cypress Hill from 91, 93, 95, 98, some of those type times, it's just not in that sort of context. There's not really much in familiarity with this particular album. I would have to say it's still relatively good. So it's a pretty good concept there. It's kind of the thing about it, but there's 4 singles on this album and I recommend all 4 of them. So it's kind of the concept. It's just they're different. This is not like How I Could Just Kill a Man or Insane in the Brain type stuff as far as that kind of happens, or some of the singles off of Temples of Boom or some of those type ones. I just would have to say some different concepts, but a lot of these just have like a very much Don Cannon and mixtape kind of East Coast kind of feel, particularly Get 'Em Up and It Ain't Nothing, and even Armada Latina are kind of like that. So 3 out of the 4 singles just kind of have like a more mixtape kind of East Coast kind of feel. This would have to say. So the first single is Get 'Em Up, and this is, like I was saying, this is a 2000s era kind of East Coast beat. I would have to say it reminds me a lot of a Don Cannon type soulful feel, definitely. And this is just kind of a strange pick for Cypress Hill. I mean, these are just some nice ones on here, but it's just outlandish for Cypress Hill as far as that kind of happens, because I didn't realize that they were a fan of. These are just outlandish as far as this kind of happens, because these are just not the typical picks that I would have seen for Cypress Hill. This is another time, like there's another time on like their unreleased and revamped from 1996, that EP that I reviewed back in June. That's kind of some more East Coast type feels, but Cypress Hill is not a stranger to East Coast and kind of stark boom bap type music. And these singles, Get 'Em Up, It Ain't Nothing, and Armada Latina, are not necessarily boom bap, but they are kind of in like the neighboring community of something that Wu-Tang, Ghostface Killah, Method Man, Redman, those type folks would kind of do in that sort of sense. It kind of has that particular pitch. The second single is It Ain't Nothing, and this is another kind of vintage 2000s era mixtape ready East Coast hop and bop type tune. It Ain't Nothing is another vintage 2000s era mixtape ready East Coast hop and bop type tune. I would have to say it's got a soulful feel about it, and this is just kind of a good smoke one cut, I would have to say. So this is just another nice highlight as far as that kind of happens. These are very similar. A lot of these singles are pretty similar, but I just like the concept of it. It's just a good pitch to kind of see that. This really feels like this should have been released in like 2006 or 2007, back when Jeezy and Cameron and Joel Santana and some of those folks were kind of doing mixtapes, and Lil Wayne and that type of stuff. Just really, I guess originally this album was supposed to come out in 2006. So that's kind of the concept. I just don't know if they held on to those songs for like the past 4 years as far as that kind of went. But a lot of these do sound like they're ripped out of 2006 or 2007. But that's kind of the concept. But the third single is Rise Up, the title track, and this one, This one's just kind of a vintage 90s political rap commentary, I would have to say, and it's just a summer stretcher, definitely, and it's just a good summer stretcher cut. So this one just really feels like something Rage Against the Machine, some of those cats would have done back in 92, 95, some of that type of stuff as far as that kind of happens. Just a good pitch as far as that kind of goes. This typical kind of activist kind of feels as far as marches and activism and just stepping out in ballots and those sort of things as far as that kind of happens in the summertime and fall as far as that kind of goes. Just a good pitch to kind of have. It's just a good extra kind of valve for Cypress Hill to kind of have some of these just being a little bit more productive and industrial in the way that they would kind of do it, them being stoners as far as that kind of happens. Just a good pitch for that. This is good concept. And then another hit single is the fourth single, Armada Latina. This has Pitbull and Mark Anthony on here also. This is like a smoke heavy, kind of soulful mixtape ready type feel, I would have to say. It's definitely some commercial. This song has like a commercial Mark Anthony hooks, really good feel for that sort of vibe as far as that kind of happens. And this is just like a Latin kind of 2000s mixtape cut, I would have to say. So if you would have gotten like a mixtape from Pitbull or something like that, something that would have been produced by DJ Drama or Don Cannon, those type folks that kind of did that 2005, 2006, 2007. This is kind of like that particular feel, like a Latino version of like a mixtape type fare from the East Coast back in 2006, 2007. Just a good pitch for how that kind of happens. Really nice cut. It's commercial too. I think this actually charted. This is the most popular song on the album according to Spotify. This has over 12 million plays, so it's a good concept. Mark Anthony does a pretty good job on the hook. I mean, Mark Anthony, I remember giving Pitbull a pretty good hook on his album Planet Pits. That's a good concept as far as that kind of happens. Just some good stuff here, this would have to say. But so there's 15 songs on this particular album, and out of those 15, I wound up recommending to you 8.5. So I would have to say that's pretty good as far as that kind of happens. I'll go ahead and recommend these 8.5 songs. They would be Pass the Dutch. The 8.5 songs would be Pass the Dutch, It Ain't Nothing, Get It Anyway, Carry Me Away, Armada Latina, Rise Up, Get 'Em Up, Light It Up, and the almost song is I Unlimited. So basically, I Unlimited is a dramatic movie like Out in the Night Wind cut. I would have to say it feels almost like espionage. This song feels almost espionage like, I would have to say, and it's pretty riveting. But the concept about it is just kind of an awkward one to kind of listen to. It just kind of has like a more dramatic, something that you would have heard out of like a James Bond or Rush Hour movie, something like that. Just one of those type pitches as far as that kind of happens. It really feels like a covert kind of espionage type feel. It's a good concept, and Cheech and Chong are on here. They do a number of intros and skits on this particular album, which is pretty dope. But I just would have to kind of say and stuff, the concept about it is just kind of one that I like this concept, but I just kind of question where I would listen to it when I wasn't smoking. If I wasn't smoking like some Swisher, if I wasn't smoking Swishers or Zigzags or something like that, it just kind of has like a more Hollywood kind of dramatic type feel that this is kind of different from what would be the standard fare to kind of listen to. But it's just, it has that tensive kind of dramatic type feel. It just has that tensive kind of dramatic type fare and that sort of concept. So it's a good concept as far as that kind of goes, but it's just kind of select where you would listen to it and stuff. I just would have to say so. There are some nice ones on here to talk about some of these, like a real nice smoking song is Light It Up. This is kind of a City Traverse kind of East Coast Starker production feel, I would have to say. It's not this song is not a traditional kind of smoke cut, but it does have like an East Coast kind of feel about it. It's just kind of the concept about it. So there's just some nice ones. This one's just kind of very City Traverse. Just kind of reminds me of something in the bustle, just kind of weaving in between the city at night and that type of stuff. Just some evening fare as far as that kind of happens. It's a good concept as far as getting that. This is another one that kind of could work with like Rise Up just in a more night and evening kind of sense. This is definitely like, there are some vintage kind of smoking songs on here. I kind of feel like Kush is an example of a bad example of that, but Pass the Dutch and Light It Up are some good smoking songs. So it's good that Cypress Hill has some of these on here. But speaking of Pass the Dutch, this is kind of like a blistering kind of heavy smoke session kind of song, I would have to say. This is like a hazy kind of smoke filled room kind of bop, I would definitely have to say. It's a head shop cut. I feel like this song is a head shop cut. I feel like this is a song that could be played in like a head shop or a hookah bar or something like that. Just a place where there'd be some smoke sessions, and it just feels foreign. This is kind of one that feels like more Middle Eastern, just kind of eviscerating in that sort of sense. This way just out in a foreign country, something like that, places where you would smoke, just out in the warmer weather, places like that, Egypt, some of those type places, India, some of those type places where you'd smoke in like a more kind of head shop type place, or just places like that. It's a good concept to kind of get that. I like that. There's some songs like that on their album Elephants on Acid, which I'm eventually going to get to, which is a good concept. But this is just a very blistering one. This is one of the best. This is probably one of the album's best beats, I would have to say. This is probably one of the album's best beats, I would have to say. So it's a good concept. And then Carry Me Away is kind of a commercial one. I was surprised about this one just because Cypress Hill doesn't normally do like pop rap commercial type stuff. It's kind of commercial in their own sense. I just like the concept. Not Carry Me Away, but Get It Anyway is the one I'm talking about. Get It Away Get It Anyway is kind of a commercial rap type tune in Cypress Hill's kind of sense. This is a Jim Johnson beat, and he was pretty popular in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and that type of stuff. This is a virtual kind of pop rap tune, I would have to say. It's just a dusty rendition of it, definitely. It's just a solid commercial Jim Johnson beat, I would have to say, and it's pretty bustling. So this is kind of like just a hustle type tune, just kind of get you on your feet and that type of stuff, just being out in the wind and that type of stuff as far as it kind of goes. It's kind of in a more kind of dusty kind of sense. It's kind of a more glazed type one, just kind of almost makeshift, I would have to say. It's just if Cypress Hill were to ever sell out, which they're not doing, but I would have to say if Cypress Hill were to ever go commercial, this would be about the closest thing to kind of getting something like that. But it does have like a pretty radio ready hook, and this is just a good example of some commercial kind of Cypress Hill as far as it kind of happens. Just like the concept of it. And then Carry Me Away has Mike Shinoda on there from Linkin Park, which is too bad that Mike Shinoda didn't drop a rap verse. He just kind of did the hook, but this is a very doomsday-like kind of murky evening malaise of a song, I would have to say. It's a good ruminating cut, and it works as like some good glazed makeshift. So this is another good makeshift song to pair up with Get It Anyway and some of those type ones. Maybe another one would kind of be Rise Up in a more Politico type sense, but I just would have to say it's a good, nice one to kind of have. I just like the concept of that one. Really has a malaise kind of emo rap type feel about it. Just like the concept of getting that one. Just some good stuff. This is a good album cut, I would have to say. It's just a good kind of ruminating type bop that just is a lot more kind of hazy and just more doomed kind of feeling. I just like the concept of getting this from Cypress Hill. It's a good one to Carry Me Away is just a good ruminating cut that just shows some extra personality from Cypress Hill as far as it kind of happened. I just like the overall murky type feel of this particular one. It's just a good extra kind of feel to kind of have for them. It's just another valve of a cut that just works pretty damn well. So it's definitely some good emo rap as far as it kind of happens. So I'd have to say that virtually takes care of it as far as the cuts I recommend and that type of stuff. But I just would have to say overall, the thing about this particular album, some of the songs I don't recommend, is just there's a lot of these kind of poor kind of East Coast type beats and just kind of more boom bap, kind of starker type productions on here that just don't always work. I feel like some of these ones like Bang Bang and Kush are just some bad examples. Like Kush was really a poor smoking song. I mean, it was trying to be like a bustling one, just kind of a more riveting one, kind of like Pass the Dutch, but just didn't Kush just didn't work quite as well as Pass the Dutch kind of did. This one was just kind of like a more city bustling type one that just didn't really have the edge that I was looking for. So it's probably one of the poorer Cypress Hill smoking songs, I would have to say. Then there's some kind of lagging songs towards the end of the album, I would have to say. Trouble Seeker, Take My Pain, Armed and Dangerous, and Shut 'Em Down. Yeah, Trouble Seeker, Take My Pain, Armed and Dangerous, and Shut 'Em Down are just some poor ones. A lot of these are just kind of more failed, kind of starker East Coast type beats that just don't work that well. I mean, I like the concept of them at least trying some new things or at least wanting to have some new valves and strengths to kind of flesh out, but they just didn't do a good job of them. Some of them were just kind of more starker productions that just didn't really suit. I kind of feel like they probably should have had like some old Cypress Hill type vibes like they were in the early 2000s and 90s and stuff. There's something like How I Could Just Kill a Man or something like that. One of those type ones, Hand on the Pump, something like that, just for their vintage days. And I kind of felt like some of these ones, like there were some kind of poor rock rap beats too. I mean, I feel like Rise Up definitely nailed it, but like Shut 'Em Down didn't. There's just some bad ones on here that just don't quite carry the edge as well as they needed to. So it's just kind of an amalgamation of poor rock rap beats and poor kind of East Coast kind of more mixtape type beats that just don't really deliver quite as well. I mean, they do it sometimes, but it's just not always that it kind of happens. So it's just kind of the concept of it. There's like a good 6.5 of these that kind of have that particular concept as far as that kind of happens. So I just would have to say, but yeah, me basically recommending 8.5 out of 15. I would have to go ahead and say, but yeah, me basically recommending 8.5 out of 15. I would have to go ahead and say, and I'm going to give this album like 8.5 out of 15. That's about, I would say I'm going to give this album like a 7.25 out of 10. I think that that's good enough. Just about a little bit above average, I would have to say. Just a little bit above average, I would have to say. Pretty solid. I like the Cheech and Chong skits on here. There's some good moments. I did like the kind of mixtape type feel that this album kind of had and some good smoke sessions and just an overall a lot of bustle and activism that this album kind of had. It's just a very productive and industrial album. It's just a different pitch from Cypress Hill that mostly works, but there just was some kind of weaker ones. Not all the production kind of worked. And it's just kind of an offhanded album in terms of production. I just kind of look after it just being able to say this is just not a very immediate album from Cypress Hill. Like if you know some of their earlier hits or some of their most popular songs, this is not this is not an album that just has like those immediate kind of highlights. I would say apart from Armada Latina, this album's a very slow burn kind of album that just kind of grows on you later. And it's just kind of more of a sleeper that just doesn't hit immediately, I would have to say. So 7.25. The social score I'm going to go ahead and give like a 7.25 also. I feel like it's middle of the road. There are some good singles on here, some good bustle, some mixtape kind of feel for like some smoke sessions just to take you back to like the 2000s and stuff like that. And just a good sense of bustle and productivism and just overall activism as far as that kind of happens with ballot and voting and that type of stuff. This things like getting weed on the ballot and some of those type things. But I just would have to say as far as that kind of happens, it just is not an immediate one. I just would say it's kind of here and there. It's just kind of one that you have to kind of know Cypress Hill a little bit better and just be more affluent to what they kind of do, more so than just like the one that's like the cream of the crop, I would have to say. So it's just kind of the concept about it. But in terms of the future, like Cypress Hill dropped an album in 2022, so they do have some other stuff. And I just discovered another Cypress Hill project from 2012 that I'm going to have to get to. So there is some more stuff here, but this is a pretty solid one, kind of offhanded, kind of different, kind of a vibrant one, but it is a pretty good one when you look past that. So it is a good concept when you look past that. So I do recommend this one.